To order at 7 p.m. Yes. Okay. First thing we have is public comment and recognition of guests. We did not receive any public comments, but thank you for everyone for being here. The first thing we have in presentations is the Wooling family presentation. We ask that those invited to come up front and join for the Wooling presentation.
There. Good evening. We as a family asked to present at tonight's meeting to recognize students who had a heavy impact on an event that occurred on September 30th of this year with one of our daughters. So we thank you, Board of Education, for allowing us to do so. 2 of our 3 daughters are type 1 diabetic. For those that aren't familiar with type 1 diabetes, is an autoimmune disease that causes high and low blood sugars due to their bodies not producing insulin. Sadie was diagnosed at the age of 6, and Mackenzie was diagnosed at the age of 11. Both of our daughters managed their diabetes with an insulin pump and were a continuous glucose monitor. But sometimes even the best of technology and equipment is not enough to prevent what happened to Mackenzie on September 30th. What started out as a normal day for Mackenzie quickly turned into what we later found out was due to a hypoglycemic event or an extreme low blood sugar during the lunchtime hour of that day. When this episode happened, and it happened very quickly, a few students took quick action and jumped right in to help. To recap the episode, Mackenzie was in the Commons for lunch and was returning from using the restroom. She sat down, picked up her phone, saw a text, and later on remembered that she couldn't read it. And before it went completely dark to her, she remembers seeing some colors of orange and red. Her phone then dropped from her hands, her head tilted all the way back, her body arched backwards, and she fell back in her chair. And that is where she got to the floor and began seizing. This is where the students you see standing up here jumped into action. While I am not fully aware of every little and big detail that they played in the next 30 minutes, we as a family would still like to highlight what we do know. Sadie Wooling, you are the one that made the call to me from the Commons telling me that something was wrong and to get to Mackenzie right away. You knowing the diabetes role, you immediately and without any hesitation grabbed the supplies needed for Mackenzie's kit and were ready to jump into action. You stood by her side when your sister needed you most, and for that, your dad and I thank you for being the sister and daughter you are. Alyssa Edwards, you immediately called 911, gave them the details of the event, and stayed on the line with them until dispatch had everything they needed to get the help to us. This is not an easy task for anyone, especially a teenager that sees her friend and teammate helpless on the floor. We appreciate everything you did that day and for your continued support you showed for Mackenzie while she was recovering. Carson Steiger. Carson is home sick today, but I still would like to share what role she played, and she was attending to Mackenzie's side. To some, this may not be a big part that she played, but she has medical training that she's received at a young age, and so she was the right person for the job. For this, Rusty and I thank her for being there with attentiveness and willingness to help where needed, and also for her continued support she showed during Mackenzie's recovery time as well. Josh Berkler, I saved you for last. Rusty and I cannot thank you enough for everything you did to help our daughter before we could get there and before EMS arrived. I was told, and then later saw, that you ran over to Mackenzie on the floor had students push tables and chairs back and away from the area, and quickly jumped into action. When I did make it to the commons, I saw a sight no parent wants to see. Her kid lying on the floor helpless. But you were already there attending to Mackenzie, and when I joined you both on the floor, I remember you saying to me, "She's breathing, she has a pulse." You were also holding her head and already applying pressure to her head wound. You also knew to start a timer for the seizure and her length of unconsciousness. Your level of calmness and positive leadership stood out, and your calm tone of talking to her and telling her everything was going to be okay is what calmed me too in that moment. The education and training you have received from the Bellflower Fire Department and BACC Emergency Medical Technician Program, and what you have taken from it and applied is outstanding. Bryce Hansen and Clayton Matson, you should be proud. Our family thanks you for your amazing program and your skilled staff at BACC. Josh, there will never be enough thank yous for what you did that day, but please know that we thank you for everything you did. You will have a very impactful career in the medical and or emergency field, and we as a family wish you the best of luck. At this time, we would like to award you all with a certificate of appreciation for your commendable leadership and roles that you all served during the medical event on September 30th with Mackenzie. We cannot thank you enough for everything you all did that day. Thank you.
Oh, you did? I just heard, like, you're on your phone. I'm like, you're gonna be in the picture on your phone. Okay, up next we have our exemplary nights. We will start off with our staff members. For our exemplary night staff members, you have been recognized by your peers for your exemplary work. As a Board of Education, we want to thank you for your efforts and positive impact on Blue Ridge. As I call your name, if you'll come forward and stay up front for a picture. From Schneider Elementary, we have our pre-K team. Amy Brock, Kim Bodie, LaDonna Patrick, Maria Aldrich, and Jamie Hammer. I know, I love that. Oh, okay. For the intermediate junior high school, Jacinta Smith. And for the high school, Phil Avella. Now do their photo. No, he didn't make it, I guess. He wasn't marked yet. Okay, and next we have our exemplary night students. Tonight we recognize the exemplary actions that brought you to the attention of your teachers and principal. As a Board of Education, we appreciate your efforts and excellence, and we want to say thank you for a job well done. From the high school, We have Kelly Weiss. Also from the high school, we have Crystal Chambers. For 8th grade, Jessie Smith. Seventh grade, Tucker Little. Sixth grade, Alyssa Greider. Fifth grade, Reese Little. Fourth grade, Michaela Tiemann. Third grade, Taya Brumfield. Second grade, Maddie Reynolds. First grade, Cora Davis. In kindergarten, Caden Flessner. Poor thing. I don't know, when's mass exodus? I think I say nothing. Okay, up next we have the communication. First thing is the IASB liaison talking points, which was included in the packet. Then the FOIA requests. It's just the one. You guys can stay. They're like, gotta go. Look at their wave.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you're good.
I'm like, everyone's leaving.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
We can move out of the way. I feel like that's very exciting. The IASB liaison talking points. That's exciting. No, I know. I was like this. I was like, this is a waste. And what's funny is, it will come literally days after this meeting for the next month. It's usually like 2 days later. I'm like, Hillary, here's for next month. I'm like, we just miss it. I was going to say, did you think you'd be in the photo over there?
It's a wide angle.
Like, Chelsea moves out of the way. She's not even on that side of the line. Take Don't give us your excuses, Chelsea. You just take the phone. It's not like you're hooked to the house with your phone. You just, yeah. See, he knows. That's how they do it at work.
Actually, at work I go, sorry, I got a dispatch to go to. Bye.
Gotta go.
Do you drive by the Brookings Center ever?
Okay, on to business. We will start with our FOIA request from Employee Data Analytics. The request was for employee names, email addresses, their role, and the location of where they work, and that was completed in a proper time.
Okay. Next is committee reports.
Committee reports, we had the group facilities, grounds, and construction that met this evening, and SIG is going to give an update from the meeting.
SIG.
Microphone.
All right, so I'll just start at the top on the 23-24 school year projects. The the chair lift replacement over at Schneider is complete and functional. The chiller replacement that we did, that's pretty much all good. There was a little warranty work that was done. All we had to pay was a service call on that, so that's awesome. And then we're waiting on moving to the next column. Concrete work over at Schneider, waiting on a little dry weather so we can dump some more dirt over soil over there in the flower bed. I don't want to rut up the yard, but it's almost done. And the bike rack, concrete pad, and also the sidewalk has been poured. It's just setting up and it's roped off, but it won't be long, and that'll be all finished. Roofing replacement. Let's see here. It's almost complete. They're waiting on a little bit for sealing up a couple of metal portions, but almost done, 95%. And asbestos abatement's been completed. The pre-K fence is done. Everybody seems pretty happy with that. The surge protection that we've been looking for the Blue Ridge Junior High School, when we lost the air conditioning over there over the last summer, we decided to put in something to protect the expensive HVAC equipment that we got, saddled with paying for in the middle of the year. So that's almost done, about 75% there. We finally got the thing that we ordered. They had to get it custom. It took a really long time. So that's exciting. The welding booths, that's coming along. We've got them, and they're planning on doing a good portion of the work over Christmas break and hopefully getting the new welding booths set up here in the high school. Let's see. The audio stuff at the junior high, that's coming along as well. We've got let me find my notes. The mat is installed and we're still waiting on the baffles. They're thinking that if nothing's changed with the schedule and arrival of the baffles, they're hoping to do them over Christmas break. So that'll be nice to see that completed. The concession building is coming along and still working on figuring a few things out with the septic system there. Track project, you ought to come by, check it out. They've been moving a lot of dirt out there and making a lot of progress. And there's a lot to be done still. Let's see. And then on to the summer 25 and beyond. This is, a little further out, so not as much progress getting made here. I mean, more like looking into it, getting bids, but it's on the radar. Parking lot resurfacing here at the high school, the Circle Drive lighting over at the, and some of these things we have to, come up with funding for too, so kind of see where it falls in the budget. But the Circle Drive lighting over in Mansfield being one of those. And then the Memorial Plaza, they've been having meetings. They keep meeting and talking about it. The funding hasn't been ironed out on it exactly yet, or the plan, and kind of leaning towards get this done, figure out what kind of space we have, what we're really working with, and then make progress with the Memorial Plaza. Exterior painting, one of those things that needs to be done. They're going to get to it. That's going to be, maintenance project. And metal roofing here over on the high school, there's over the old locker rooms, there's a problem that needs to be addressed, and they're thinking that they can take care of that in-house as well. But it's probably going to be a summer project when everybody's out of here. Pre-K storage, we're talking to the industrial arts class about that, Tungate, seeing what he could do with some drawings for the pre-K storage, because the buildings are in disrepair, let's say. The little sheds, they're rough. So we'd like to get a good permanent solution on that. Dugout rehab over at the junior high, that too is something that's looking like a summer project for maintenance. Fire alarm upgrades, that is all kind of outside work. We're bringing in a company to deal with all the upgrades on that. And wing windows, okay, so something that came up on HLS was the wing windows in like the shop area, the high school, the industrial arts class and the ag class. Those, we're going to have to go out for bids and look at that. It was identified that they weren't efficient enough, and I don't know exactly how that comes back to health, life, safety, but they're really inefficient. We lose a lot of energy through there, so they dinged us on it, and so we've got to go out and get bids. So we're trying to figure that out and waiting on bids, or maybe even waiting on going out for bids because they're so busy with all the other projects. And then there's some interior painting. They've been doing a lot of work on getting it down to just a few colors, because between the three buildings, the 2 campuses, there were, I think Rusty said, 40 different colors of paint. And so they're getting it down to just a handful. That way everything can look the same. And then they'll just be going to those, and they've been saving them. I don't know what the paint vendor was they were working with them, but they have them all logged now. So when we need it recreated, we can get it and we can get the right color. And then, what was that?
Nix.
Nix. And then kitchen remodel is something that made it onto the list here. This is over at Schneider, and it's original. And so we're going to look into it. And LED upgrade here at the schools. They're working on that too. That'll be in-house, and they're going to be reusing the light fixtures, modifying them, and using LEDs in an effort to save energy and lower our power bill. And then HVAC insulation, the tiles, because there's a breach in the insulation above the tiles, they leak condensation in the summertime when you're blowing the cold air through them, and it damages the ceiling tiles. So they've got to get a good game plan together for removing the grid and re-insulating the ductwork. And so the first stage is looking at that stuff that's out there for the summer of '25 and beyond. But those are the projects. If you've got any other big projects that you see need to happen, let us know. Any questions?
No?
All right.
Okay. Up next is administrative reports.
Okay. I will just mention briefly that our principals are going to be talking to you about results from the Illinois School Report Card, so I won't steal their thunder, let them do that. We conducted practice reunification and intruder drills a few weeks ago in each building, and we were very successful in doing so. There's always things to learn. That's why we do our drills, to learn how to be better next time, to be safer. But we also saw a lot of muscle memory, things that were working, people were remembering from last time we've done that, so we were pleased to see that. We're still getting used to our new Crisis Go app that we moved from Navigate Prepared, still working out some of the kinks and bugs in that, and also transitioning to the I Love You Guys Foundation language. So there's just different things that we come across each time that we do something new for practice that we need to continue to work on. So we have those roles assigned, and we'll continue to get better. And then just to highlight, you saw in my report, going into classrooms in each of the buildings and having visits and being a part of reading and doing activities with the kids. That's always a joyful time for me, so I'm glad that I get the opportunity to do that. Underneath my report in board book, you're going to see the presentation for the tax levy. I'll save that talk until we get to the new business down there, but I will say track exchange zones, we've talked about that. Should they be colored? Should they not be colored? And I told you last time, if I did the math looking at what Dalton had given to us, we expected that to be a $35,000 cost for exchange zone coloring only. He did come back and tell us it would be $30,000, so a little bit cheaper than what I had calculated from different information that he had given me. He did say that cost for that product would probably go up at the beginning of a calendar year. So he said if you are interested in that, for sure, you would want to probably do board action in December, so we could lock in that price. I was asked by Francie to go back to Dalton and say, what if we committed now and then later we decided because of something else more expensive that happened out there in the project, because there's still a lot of room for errors out there, what if we decided we had to back out financially? And he has not gotten back to me yet on that. He's going to check to see what other projects they're working on would be using that color, who else would be producing that. And that might be a way, if you found other people that were using the gray, that might be a way for us to be able to make that decision later. So I'll tell you when I get that information. I'll include that in your weekly email when I know, and probably you'll see it again on the December list so we can make a decision. If you ask Rusty or myself, we would say, like I just alluded to, there's way too much more of the project to be done. So financially, I would not feel comfortable with making a commitment for colored exchange zones, but that's one person's opinion. And like I said, we'll talk about the tax levy later in the meeting. Thank you.
Any questions for Hillary? Okay. Ryan? Yeah, we're going to do something a little bit different. Okay.
Well, good evening, all. So, put together a little slideshow for you guys to talk about our. You guys probably saw through Dr. Stanifer's letter recently that the report card and IAR results are official now for last school year, and so we broke some of that data down the 3 campuses, and we wanted to share it with you guys this evening. Okay. Sorry, forgive the it's a little misnomer. It's all 3 of us, not just me. So. So the IAR, that stands for the assessment, Illinois Assessment of Readiness. Probably should speak in this. Sorry, turn this so I can see. So at our school, that means that's a battery of 5 assessments, 3 in mathematics, 2 in ELA, that all of our grades take. I don't know why it says 5 through 8. It's supposed to be 4 through 8. Oh, just a little bit different timing. So I'm going to go through these slides a little bit quickly because there's lots of information. I don't want to bore you guys. So from the report card, there's designations all the way from exemplary, which is the top 10%, commendable, which is the largest group of schools that's kind of in that middle. Targeted means that one of your subgroups, one of your student groups, is in the bottom 5% or lowest 5% of the schools in the state. We were targeted at the intermediate junior high school for students with disabilities when I first came in. Those are students that have IEPs and 504 plans. We've since left that designation. Then comprehensive support is when you have more than 2 of those student groups that are in that bottom 5%. And yeah, that's not a place you want to be. So the way the designation is calculated, 75, 3/4 of it is academic indicators, both ELA and math growth, ELA and math proficiency, and then science proficiency. Many schools have English language student groups inside. We do not, so that 5% gets redistributed amongst the other 5 indicators. And then the other 25% in elementary and middle schools is chronic absenteeism at 20 and the climate survey that we have our students in. Try to get as many parents as we can to fill out every year as 5% of that. So, everything's weighted out a little bit differently. So you can see that the growth is where the heavy weight is on that academic side, making up that score. The proficiency is 7.5% together. Science is 5%, and you can see Mr. Easter will talk a little bit about what the graduation and how those are weighted. Chronic absenteeism for us is at 20% at elementary and middle, a little different weight at high school just based on how they do it. And then there's that climate survey, and then there's some other indicators that the high school has that we do not. So when students get their scores, from their IAR, both in English language arts and math. They are scored at 5 different levels, not meeting expectations, partially met, approaching, met, and exceeds. It's the met and exceeds that gives us those proficiency scores that you saw earlier, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. So this is the exciting part. Here's some really good trends. So I went ahead and broke out the last 3-year trends. This is my 3rd year at the school. You can see the year right before I got there, we were at 16.1% proficiency in ELA for 4th through 8th grades. And this last year, we are at 47.8. So we've made some really big gains there. We're pretty proud of that. And our goal now is to continue to grow and definitely maintain. Oop. In math, our math score shows where we need some work. While we've made growth, we're starting at 12.7 in 2022. We've almost doubled that at 23.9. We're still not at where you can see the state average is at 27.9. So we've got some room to grow there. It's part of our school improvement plan. It's part of our focus in our grade level collaborations this year. And it's going to be something that is going to be very intentional about what we work on. Our science data is 5th and 8th grade only. You can see we've had pretty good growth in that also, but we continue to outpace the state averages for all of that time. So we're pretty happy there. This is a scatter plot here, just to kind of show you, that's that student with disabilities group. It's a little hard to see, but you can see those giant clusters. So students with disabilities, you can see there's a lot of cluster of kids in that lower 10 and 20%, and then as it moves up, the cluster starts to spread out, okay? We are part of that group that's spreading out, meaning that our scores are going up. So on the y-axis there, that's the meets and exceeds, whereas the x-axis there is the percentage of students that have that represent that subgroup with disabilities. That's in ELA. You can see math is really hard around the state. You see that scatter? Everybody's kind of clustered right there at the bottom. We are kind of moving our way out of there. So we're not in that bottom cluster, but we want to be in that, as it starts to spread out in that top, we want to start getting into that 30th percentile. That's where we'll break out from the rest of the group. Wanted to show you also, because we do have a student group for low SES at our school, as the other campuses do too. And that triangle, again, represents us. It's a much different scatter plot when you look at a different student group, much more spread out. So there we are for ELA with pretty high percentage of low SES students, so I'm saying for socioeconomic, so those are students that are free and reduced lunch. And in mathematics, you can see it's a little different, still very spread out, but again, it kind of mirrors what the rest of our groups have done. Both the students with disabilities and the rest of the students. This is another area that's going to be a focus for our school improvement plan, is how do we improve attendance. So chronic absenteeism is, students that are missing 18 or more days of school per year, 10% of the school year. And you can see that the state average this year was 26.3. We are at 21, so we're under the state, but still not a great percentage. We want to get under that 20%, and I'll show you some historical data. We've been there. So that's the historical data there from 2018 through 2024 at BRIJHS. 2020 doesn't count so much because attendance was a little fuzzy back then. So I don't think anybody's attendance was really accurate there. But you can see in 2019 and 2018 years that they were below 20%. And I think that's a good goal for us to get below that 20th percentile, or 20%. This is the most exciting news. So these are stay nines here every 5%. So you can see anything below that 40 there is considered targeted or comprehensive. Everything between that 40 and the 84 and 400s is commendable. It's a large group of schools. And anything above that is the top 10% of schools, what they consider exemplary. So our combined score is 81 and 7600ths, and it combines all those elements that we saw in that pie chart. So we've got just a really little bit of work to do before we get pushed into that top 10%. We're excited about that possibility. We talked about it at the staff meeting this evening, the things that we need to do. And we're excited about that. That's our goal. That's got to be our goal. Things that we're focusing, like I said, improving math and attendance is part of our school improvement plan. We're bringing in math coaching from ROE to help us accomplish some of those goals. Our building leadership team is working on implementing some attendance plans and attendance recognition, really making that an important focus for our students and families. We'll reach out to families at home. A big part of that is having homework time at home, having a homework space at home. Those seem like little things, but that's hard for a lot of families. Attendance goals, making sure that if kids are missing, we're collecting materials, making sure that they keep up. reminding parents attendance is important, maybe asking them to schedule appointments at times that doesn't pull them out of school. Be surprised the number of kids that ask them where they were at a dentist appointment. All day? But yeah, it happens sometimes. And then in the spring, you know, letting parents know, hey, we're setting aside this time to take this really important assessment, even though it's one assessment. It shows our kids it shows everybody what our kids can do in that one snapshot for both math and ELA. Getting good rest time, getting to school on time, because we'll start those in the morning, have one a day. And that's been a pretty good recipe for us and, as part of our improvement, not trying to cram them all in at one time, but showing the kids how important these are for us and for them to show what they can do.
Just come out of here. Perfect. I don't have to bend over. All right, yeah, so Bert covered a lot of the IAR, kind of the background information about what the test is. For us, our annual testing, we really do spring testing one time in our building, which is very similar to what the Mansfield building does. They do science assessments as well. We only have one cohort that assesses in our building, and so we only do third grade. And so you'll see our scores fluctuate a little bit because we have a small data collection group that we have. But just overall, kind of our assessment profile, in pre-K, we don't really have a state assessment, but we utilize Teaching Strategies Gold, which is it's more of an observational base. It's a portfolio collection, looking at different things that students are doing and collecting through kind of a non-standardized, you know, fill in the blank, but more through observation and just things that are done there. The kids assessment, very similar. That's done in kindergarten. We do not do the science assessment. That starts in 5th grade, and I think again it's done in 8th. And then we just do a variety of testing to get information that drives our instruction. So we do benchmark testing with iReady 3 times a year. When we identify students that are needing additional support, we progress monitor. That varies a little bit depending on which tier students are in, and then we just do a variety of classroom assessments that drives kind of our daily instruction. I hit the sign one? I've never used this before. Okay, this is kind of a view of our house here, and this kind of shows up our rankings and kind of the overall index score. So we were a commendable school. At the top, you can see the index. Does it have a pointer too? Never used this before. Oh, can't see. Anyway, you can see our overall index score. We are commendable. You kind of see the 5 areas that we're broken down into. Like Bert was saying before, we don't have ELL learners. We don't have climate surveys. Those are really student-driven. So a lot of our scoring, you can see at the bottom, you can see the weight distribution of where the overall cumulative score is created. Our area that we have a lot of growth to work in is the ELA proficiency. That is an area that we will continue to work at, and we've done a lot of work with instruction, curriculum over the past 2 years, and we are continuing to do that work moving forward. ELA growth, you can see that's a great number overall. That number really looks at, so basically when my 3rd grade students, let's say my 3rd grade students score a 130 on an assessment, that's just a very random number, has nothing to do with IAR. The next year when they take that assessment, they are compared to every student in the state that got a 130 the prior year, and they look at the growth that happens from that cohort of students. So our students are making really good growth in those areas. So we're happy about that ELA growth. Chronic absenteeism is actually pretty decent. I think we talked about state average is around 26. We're at 13.7. Our goal is to get down to 10, somewhere in that area. That's one of our SIP goals that we have this year, because obviously the more that we have students in the classroom, the more direct instruction is happening, and the more learning that's going to take place. Math proficiency, that's an area since I've been here the last 9 years, we have done very well. I think every year since I've been at Slater Elementary, we have been above state average in math, which is a really great feat for us. And then math growth. Once again, our kids, when they move to Mansfield, you know, we don't have much control of that, but once again, they did a great job ELA. Math is an area that he's described earlier as an area of focus with SIP and math coaching and a variety of things that we're utilizing to bring that growth score up. This is kind of our comparison. If you saw Mr. Huddleston and BRI-JHS, it was really close to that exemplary side. We're kind of right in that middle area. A lot of that I contribute to our ELA scores that we're continuing to work toward, looking at curriculum improvements, looking at instructional improvements. like Mr. Huddleston was saying, our grade level meetings, we're constantly focusing on different things that we're doing within instructional side of ELA. Last month we were talking about kind of decodable readers and phonics skills and how we're promoting and building that automaticity with some of these new phonics skills that we're putting in place. We'll talk a little bit more about that here when we get to that slide. ELA scores, once again, not an area that we are strong in and that we are working to improve. If you look, mine's set up a little bit differently. They look at all 3 years, but there's a comparison between school, district, and state. Last year, we only had about 15% of our students that met and exceeded in 3rd grade. So that's obviously an area of growth that we need to have. 2023, we were around 19, and before that, we were around 15 again. So that's an area that we're working to build. We've noticed some gaps in our curriculum, and that's what we're working toward addressing, and we've already done some of that. We've really working on the word recognition side of that reading strand right now, looking at building phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency. All those pieces, when we develop automaticity in those areas, are going to lead to kind of improved reading comprehension later on. Math, you can kind of see here, broken down by all 3 years that are set up. At the top, you can see 2024. I think we had about 36.5% of our students meeting and exceeding. State average is around 28. So each of those areas, we've basically been anywhere between 8 and 15 points above the state average over the last 3 years. That is an area of strength for our building for sure. What does this mean for Snyder Elementary? SIP goals this year are really focused on English and language arts. Within English and language arts, we're really focusing on proper implementation of UFLY. UFLY is a reading curriculum that we've added that focuses more on phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency. It also does a lot, and that's what we call decoding. There's also a lot of encoding practice, which is like a lot of spelling practice, building like explicit, systematic ways that we introduce letters, letter sounds, and the fluency process. So we've seen a lot of really positive data points at this point just from this year. We utilized it last year in our title and special ed programs and saw some really good growth. So we're excited about having that in our tier 1 area. Obviously, we talked a little bit earlier about just the instructional practices and things that we're working on within ELA to support our teachers, resources, et cetera. We're working with our ELA district literacy committee. Ms. Trimble's helping to lead that process. Looking at, right now, we've been doing it for quite some time. Yes, in September, we've been looking at curriculums. We've been looking at reviews, rubric reviews to make sure that we have and build or get something that really meets all those evidence-based research practices or evidence-based teaching practices so that we have a really solid ELA curriculum. And really thinking about that knowledge and vocabulary building that a curriculum will have. And then we're doing some writing professional development with the University of Illinois as well, really to build those skill sets because that is a portion of IAR. What can stakeholders do at home? Mr. Huddleston mentioned a lot of it. My thing is, especially with ELA, just reading to your child, reading with your child, talking with your child, like having dialogue and conversation, exposing them to different language and vocabulary and experiences. A lot of research related to strong readers and comprehension comes with background knowledge and vocabulary. So the more opportunities that you have to read to your student, the more opportunities that you have dialogue with your student and talk to them and build their vocabulary, the more successful they'll be able to pick up a book or any type of article or reading whatever it may be, any text, and they're going to have a better chance of understanding something. So just constant exposure, reading to them, conversation will be very helpful.
Questions for Mr. Payton?
Can you go back over?
Yeah. Right. Fortunately, I won't have to do a whole lot of explaining because you guys have already seen and heard a lot of this. Here's our high school graph, how things break down. The biggest chunk there, 50% of our report card comes from our graduation rate, which is determined by the kids who enroll in a school year. So this year's freshman class that just entered will be the class of 28. So when we get to, they'll look at the kids that started with us today, or at the beginning of this year. When we get to May of 28, how many of those kids made it? It doesn't matter if they leave the district and they go somewhere else. We're still held accountable for them if they started with us. So it's kind of motivation for schools to not give up on kids and to keep pushing them towards graduation. And another piece of that is then we have to get tabs on kids that move away or go homeschool and stuff like that. And we have to try to track them down and figure out what happened to them and get evidence of whether or not they made it. But our breakdown is very similar. We've got English, math, science stuff in there. Just like Bert mentioned, our English learner progress, that 5% gets spread in different areas for us. And then the other school quality stuff is kind of the same. The climate survey, how many of our teachers and how many of our students complete that, or is it just students? Okay, so yeah, if our students, and we usually get pretty close to 100% because Paige is awesome at being very persistent that we get that done. Ninth graders on track to graduate is a score based on our ninth graders when they finish. It looks at English and math, and do we have failures in English and math amongst our ninth grade freshman students. So here's our house breakdown. Our score was a 78.10, commendable. Last year we were like 78.7, so same general ballpark. You see we've got ELA proficiency and math proficiency. Those are based on how our kids do on the SAT in those areas. That's changing because starting this year, the state is doing an ACT. So, I mean, we're still going to be rated, those scores are rated against other kids throughout the state, so it'll still be apples to apples, but it's just going to be different. It's a different assessment. So we're not real sure what next year is going to look like, but one of the things we're trying to do is make sure that we're doing some practice questions, especially with our juniors, that we've got some practice ACT questions built in some different classes, and also in our Zello program that we do with students. It's a career readiness type thing, and there's some opportunities for them to do some practice ACT in there. You see graduation rate. We scored fairly high in that. Ninth graders on track is a score of a 5 out of 8 possible. Last year, that score was like a 2 or a 3. A couple years ago, we did not have a good success with our freshmen. Last year was considerably better. Science proficiency is based on the Illinois Science Assessment, which I'm actually not sure if they're still doing because ACT has a science section on it, so we're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen there. Our biggest negative is that green one up there, the chronic absenteeism, and just like Bert talked about, that just looks at and it's a relatively tough standard. I mean, they want 90% attendance from students, and actually, I'll get to that in a second. let me skip ahead. Here's where we fall overall throughout the state. So you see we're skewed towards the right side. Those bars at the bottom, that's the percentage of schools basically that fall within that area. So we're in that 78-10. So there's 10% of the schools in the state fall in that category. So when I look at where we ranked, we're in the top third of schools in the state. Is that fantastic, awesome, cause for celebration? Not really. It'd be nice to be in the top 10%. We got quite a ways to go to be in that. There's little things that we can keep doing to ensure that we head towards that direction. Some highlights from last year. One of the things in this small graphs, I apologize. On the left, the SAT English performance. Something we were excited about is 2024. That dark green tab is the percentage of students that exceeded expectations or exceeded standards in English, and that's the highest score we've ever had on that since they started tracking that data, so we're kind of excited about that. The ninth grade students on track, as you can see, we definitely had a lull, but we feel like we're trying to climb back up in a positive direction there, getting our ninth graders on track. I think our biggest concern is chronic absenteeism. And again, if any kid misses 18 school days over the course of the year, no matter what, they're considered to be chronically absent. So, the state attendance on average is around 90%, for schools across the state. So that's kind of the standard. And if you're not in school 90% of the time, then you're considered chronically absent. We were at about 32%. I think 32.3% of our students last year missed at least 18 days, and that's a big number. And so we're trying to figure out what can we do to get kids to come to school. And that's kind of our focus for sure, because I think that is the biggest thing, because we believe that when kids are at school that they'll learn better and they'll find better successes. So how can stakeholders help? Most importantly, the importance of strong school attendance. And, obviously we're going to continue to work with our freshman English and math courses and make sure that those kids are staying on track. Really trying to work on truancy. Mr. Kirkton being here full-time every day is really getting after that, and then offering some incentives to kids that we're finding are struggling to be here early in the morning. And so we've got some different things that we're working on there. Continue to do things with ELA math and science in our classes to try to get kids prepared for the ACT. And and something that we found is that students who have an attendance rate of 95% or higher, they're more likely to earn those grades of A's or B's, while if you have a lower attendance rate, they're obviously at a higher risk of falling behind academically. So, I think that's kind of common sense. So, questions?
How does Illinois compare to on a national basis? Like when they say we've got 6% reading or English language arts, that's pretty pathetic, to be blunt.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Is it that, so that's 6% of kids can read to grade level?
Wait, where is that at?
Or was I misunderstanding something?
Is that on the English performance here?
No, it wasn't over here. I don't know, which graph was that on?
Is it here? Yeah, they're very small numbers, yeah.
Like that, so that's the proficiency level, so 6.16 out of 8.04, so that's the Illinois standard.
No, that's how
8.04.
Blue Ridge did. That's 6.16. That's our score out of a potential 8.04. So roughly, our kids landed in about the 75th percentile is the way that I read that statewide.
Okay, so that would be like the equivalent of having an average of a 20%?
75%.
No. Yeah, but that's only, but if you look at the state numbers, the average is like 25%. So is that what they're comparing to, or?
These scores are compared to the state, yes.
Yeah, and it's compared to the state average, which would be 25% of literacy at grade level, which is pathetic. Really. What is it nationwide, though? What's the average? Because that seems horrible.
I will tell you that Illinois has higher standards for proficiency than most any other state, and so
Good.
that's something that the State Board of Education, Dr. Tony Sanders, has been looking at. It's going to be a tough conversation to have with legislators when you're saying we want to have lower standards for our kids, but when we compare to other states, we are extremely high in what our expectations are compared to those around us.
Well, that would be a good thing.
And I understand, but the numbers are tough to look at when you see where we fall in there. The goal is always to improve, obviously, and to find out, to disaggregate the data so we can find out where are we falling short. Is it a student group? Is it an overall content area? And then what do we do to address that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the goal.
Mm-hmm. Would you like them to give any more of their reports?
He's like, I read it. Okay, curriculum. Well, but she hasn't got to talk. She should just show cute baby pictures for 5 minutes.
There we go. Okay. So just a few things that were not in my report or that I want to highlight. We did receive some additional title funds last month, so I've worked on amending Title 1, 2, and 4 and just submitted that, I think it was yesterday, and so we haven't heard back yet. But that's always a pleasant surprise when we get some more funds to support our teachers and students. Today we had a full day 6th through 12th grade ELA alignment, and it's pretty exciting to see how far that group has come. When we first started meeting 5 years ago, and we're like, we're going to meet for an entire day. What are we going to talk about for the entire day? And now we're running out of time before we even get through our to-do list. So that's pretty exciting. Some of the things that we worked on today were common assessments, writing projects. We had some time to specifically discuss the 6th through 8th grade ELA adoption. We worked on tools for students to use as a reference in all classes that would be aligned and used at 6th through 12th grade. We had Andrea Weedman come in and present on technology tools that are specifically involving AI and how they can impact an ELA classroom. So that was today. We will meet again in February, and then our last meeting for the year will be in April. Like Mr. Payton said, one of our goals is to improve writing instruction, and he referenced that we have Dr. McKenna from the U of I coming and doing writing workshops with some of our teachers once a month. And this month we were looking at specific work samples of our students and having time to really collaborate and dig into those using a rubric to see where they're scoring, what skills we could be improving upon, and how our lessons can reflect that. That was yesterday. Our literacy committee, which is made up of staff members K through 12, we have teachers, admin, special ed, title, speech and language, are really looking at different ELA programs so that we can fill in some of the gaps that they all referenced in their slideshow. In addition, we also had 2 coaches in this month. We had Katie Thomas, who specifically worked with 6th through 8th grade math, and their focus this month was on modeling and reasoning, getting our students prepared for the IAR assessment in the spring. And then this month, Haley Thomas, who is also our ROE math coach, Haley Burt, not Thomas. She worked with our Snyder teachers this month and really modeled some lessons for them that they chose what it was that they really wanted to try to improve upon. So she came in and modeled, and then they had time to conference with her to talk about how they could implement it in their daily lessons. So I think that's all I had in addition. Do you have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Can we get cute baby pictures afterward? With Santa. We felt like that would have been a better use of time. Show us pictures.
Yeah, just pictures next time.
Okay, I can do that. I can spell that, yeah. Okay, the rest of the reports are in the packet. And next we have approval of consent items. If there are no comments on the consent items, I need a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items listed on attachment A as presented. Chelsea? And Jonathan? Yes. Up next is old business, BACC facility fee agreement.
Last month, we talked about the introduction of the OAB, Oakland Avenue building, that BACC will be moving into, hopefully for the fall of 2024. A tremendous amount of space in the old State Farm building that we're going to have. We did have another BACC meeting today. Just so you know, the architect that they're working with, I think we were given an estimated cost of $3 million that we were going to split. We agreed to our portion of that last month based upon our enrollment in BACC over the last, I believe it was 5-year average. The architect has now taken that cost way up over $4 million. So at this point, District 87 is going to take care of the rest of that or decide what they're not going to do. If at some point along the way they decide to come back to districts to ask again, then I'll bring that back to you. Tonight's action is just formalizing and asking for Francie's signature to go on the joint agreement between all of the districts to say that, yes, we'll pay this one-time facility fee so we can have the remodel done for the OAB. And they are looking at totally rebranding BACC and coming up with a new name that's a little bit more engaging and descriptive of what really happens inside those 4 walls. So we're excited about that work this year.
Any questions or comments?
I got to tour the facility for the open house, and it is truly tremendously large. And the kitchen area, because obviously my son does the culinary program at BACC, The kitchen is huge.
I want to
It-
work there too.
Yeah, it was great. Everything I saw. I mean, they have a working car lift that State Farm's gonna leave there for them. Like, it's just a phenomenally large building, and then you have parking in the back. I mean, you're never gonna run out of parking. So, some of our kids who want to go there, and then maybe work or travel by themselves would be able to, where they can't do that now. So it's an awesome investment, I think.
Okay. If there's no other comments or questions, I need a motion and a second to approve the facility fee resolution for BACC as presented. Derek? Jason? Yes. Now, new business, consideration of reclassification of custodial maintenance position.
So our last employee that joined the custodial maintenance team, we brought him on full-time, but it was kind of a shared position, meaning he was set up as, we were hoping 25 hours a week of maintenance and 15 hours a week of custodial work. We have found that, I believe he's been here for about a year. After living in that situation for about a year, I really created a mess for that employee filling out 2 timesheets every week, and also for payroll staff being able to figure that out. Because what we do is we set an annualized salary for that person based on the 25-15 split. It's not been anywhere close to that. The maintenance hours have been exceeding 35 hours per week, and the custodial is a very small portion of that. My recommendation would be to move that to a full-time maintenance position. Definitely could be used. Those who sat in the meeting just a few minutes ago in the other office, we found out there's a lot of work that our team is doing internally because we have the skill set for that to be done. And so really what you're looking at is a difference of $3.40 an hour and probably 5 hours a week. So we're talking $17 a week difference. And most likely we've been using more than 35 hours of maintenance. He has already been paid that way because the agreement was if you work more maintenance hours at the higher rate, you would be paid for that. So this is really kind of a paperwork shuffle to make sure that we're easing things up a little bit, but also pretty truly representing what's happening. And he would still be doing some of the custodial role. We have switched some of the custodial runs around. Some requests were made here at the high school, and we've moved some things around based on what our needs are. The split person will still be doing a little bit of cleaning on a regular basis, but our 2 maintenance staff, Steve and Rusty, also do that regularly when somebody's absent or when there's a need. So that's my recommendation.
Any questions or comments by those on the facility committee? Okay, if not, I need a motion and a second to reclassify the custodial maintenance position to a full-time maintenance position as presented. Chelsea. Derek. Yes. Up next is consideration for approval to increase the FFA credit card limit.
This credit card for FFA is new within the last year or two. It has a limit of $5,000 currently. As you know, and as you've approved, there are many trips that the FFA group takes, those officers. Sometimes there's an overnight stay, and so sometimes those costs during a month's period of time can exceed $5,000. Even if we were to pay on that, we still couldn't charge any more on that card. So that's causing a situation where somebody gets to a hotel and potentially the teacher would have to put that on a personal credit card. This teacher does a fantastic job with her record keeping and with turning things into the unit office in a timely fashion. It would be my recommendation that we raise that limit. We have to have board approval to do so. And that would allow her to function properly.
Any questions? No one. Okay. If not, I need a motion and a second to approve the district credit card limit increase for Blue Ridge FFA as presented. Derek? Chelsea? Yes. Next is the county school facility tax for McLean County.
Again, there was another meeting today with the McLean County Superintendents at the ROE, and they are not just considering, but they will be putting a 1% sales tax on the April 1st ballot. Unit 5 is represents more than half of the students in McLean County, so they don't even have to have the blessing of the other districts within the county. They're large enough that they can put that on the ballot, and so they have made the decision that they are going to do so. This would allow money from any sales that were taxed, and I'll give you a list in a minute of what counts and what doesn't count, or what would be taxed and what wouldn't be. That 1% sales tax would come back into the school district. It can be used for things such as safety measures, such as a school resource officer, salary, and also mental health professionals. Those are newer areas that are added to the allowable use of the CSFT funds. Currently, we are a district that sits in 3 counties. We do have a Piatt County sales tax that comes into us, and that's done. Christy usually fills out a report in the fall that shows how many students we have from each county. That's what determines how much of that fund comes to us every month. So if this was to be approved by voters, what would not be taxed under this CSFT would be groceries and unprepared food, drugs, most farm equipment and implements, services, and items purchased at wholesale. What would be taxed would be prepared food, retail purchases, gas, online purchases. There is also conversation with all the involved superintendents that we would, in our own districts, make a decision about abating taxes, meaning whatever comes in, part of that we would use to lower the debt burden or lower the tax burden on the local taxpayers. One thing that when Francie and I talk, because Francie has experience with this 1% sales tax as a board member, I do not. But if you're thinking about where we are situated, our McLean County students are our Bellflower students. We don't have a lot of purchasing that goes on in Bellflower. So this would not be a real tax impact to us, but from all the shopping that gets done in McLean County and from all the online shopping that gets done from residences in McLean County, then we would get our equivalent portion based on what our enrollment is in McLean County. If this was on, not if, this will be on the April 1 ballot, and so the sales tax would, if it was passed, then the sales tax generation would start in July of 25 and would actually come to the school district on a monthly basis starting in October of 25. July of 25, sorry, and then money would start coming in on a monthly basis in October of 25. So really what I'm doing for you tonight is giving you that information. It would be good if you had questions to ask those now, because I learned today, after having this in the board book already, that next month you will be asked if you would like to pass the resolution in support of this going on to the ballot. Of course, it looks better when all school districts are in alignment with that. There is some talk across the state about doing like a mandatory all the way across the state, everybody would do this. But McLean County has chosen to kind of push this forward at this time instead of waiting for that decision. DeWitt County, that would be Clinton that would make the decision, not us, even though we would share in the DeWitt County proceeds, and they are pausing at this time. So any thoughts, any questions, anything that I can bring back to the ROE and ask about for you? Or any comments from those who have lived through this on the board?
I think Bloomington schools need some help.
They need it.
So I think for.
It's Unit 5, which is normal, actually.
So I think that's where the highest percentage of the taxes would go.
And this is after they just raised
Yep.
taxes, was it 2 elections ago? Or 1 election? Not this past one, but one prior. They asked for an increase, one of the last big school board elections.
Yeah, they passed a referendum, yeah.
Champaign County already has had this 1% for a very long time. And you can tell from their facilities and the facilities in Mahomet. That's what it was all paid for with. Yeah, they got to figure something out. So,
We're live.
for me, I think some of this is, it's easy for us. We are a very small part of McLean County. Since usually ag is not taxed in this, the only business that really Bellflower has is a feed mill. So besides making purchases online, you guys are welcome, I do a lot of that, so there would be that percentage. Yeah. So, but other than that, the money we would collect would be more than what we're putting out into that. So it's really not a hard vote, I don't think, for people in Bellflower. That's who would vote on it for it to go through, so. Mhm. Yeah. And in Bellflower, we don't have that.
And
Yeah.
Sig, this is not a board, the only decision that this board is asked to make next month would be, would we want to do our part in saying, yes, we would want it on the ballot, although it really doesn't mean anything because it's going on there anyway, because we have one school district that's over 50% of the enrollment. It's really a voter's choice at this point. Are they just asking for a letter of support? Yes. Yes. They'll write the letter, they'll ask you to sign. Yeah. So no action on that.
Yeah. Okay. Up next, we have discussion of detachment request from Blue Ridge CUSD 18.
All right, so we have, I was contacted by an attorney regarding this detachment, and we do have the Dean family here represented tonight if you have any questions. We have information in the board packet that was presented by Mrs. Dean, some reasoning behind the request. We have a formal documentation written up by the attorney called the Stipulation and Consent to Detachment and Annexation that you have there to read. A lot of formal language there. We also have a drawing showing the property, and obviously they're contiguous to the Leroy School District. And then you do have another report from Mrs. Diener in there. And so I know that you've had board books since the end of the week. You've probably had a chance to read through everything, so we felt like it was appropriate for the deans to be here to see if you had any questions that you wanted to ask in person before you're asked to make a decision. And it's my understanding that any decision that the board makes tonight is just to gather their perspective, their collective decision on whether this would be a yes or a no, but really it's up to the ROE. That's where the work gets done, and I would be invited to represent the board at that meeting. I think they perhaps call it a hearing, and so then this vote tonight would be the board directing me as to what to say when I get invited to that hearing at the ROE.
Okay. Any thoughts? Everyone's pulling up the paperwork.
Just if you had any questions, perhaps the map was, maybe it was a little bit hard to understand the map. If you had any map questions that you wanted to ask about. If anybody here has not been through a request for detachment and you wanted to ask kind of a generic question, I know our board president has been through that situation before, so that would be an appropriate question to ask. We don't have to, you're right, we're not talking about an individual student out loud right now.
So your property butts right up to Leroy?
From what I understand, that would be required for them to be eligible to even ask this. Mhm.
I guess one question I have, 4.5 acres of land, is any of that farmland? It's a lot of land. 4.5 acres is a lot of land.
So the things to consider, this would be part of our tax base that would be removed from our EAV. It's also a situation that, you know, we have to, as a board, you're charged with making decisions not just for the immediate question at hand, but you're making a decision for any future requests that would come. So it's a matter of considering multiple things at the same time, very carefully and cautiously when you're making that decision.
We can always say we want to think of it.
See ya.
Where is it going? We're like, what is happening? Okay.
And you can see on page 135 the board potential motion there. I don't know what the timetable is in your mind, if anybody's, you know, given you a time frame in which you need an answer. I'm not aware of. Okay, not aware of any time frame. If there's anything that would cause you to want to hesitate today and bring it back up for discussion in December, then we can do that as well. Yeah, I think you could probably ask them tonight if they wanted to stay.
Does anybody have any questions, I guess?
I don't, and it is nothing personal, just for me personally, I'm a no, just because I just feel like giving up property in our district is a really, really big deal, and so for me, it would be very hard for me to vote yes. Right, but I have to look at what if you don't live in that house forever, that house is still going to be out of our tax base. So I have to look at it long-term also. I'm talking about the taxpayer interest. Long-term. Because I'm charged to protect that also. And think that considering, and then setting up, right, I completely understand that. And that I think is a separate discussion, if there's concern of that, and that there are many students that, you know, maybe have had issues or concerns, and so we deal with those, and that doesn't mean that we annex property away to deal with that. That's just mine, and again, it's nothing personal against any student or any family, it's just me being honest and saying that honestly out loud. Yeah, so that's just the hardest part for me, and I know that you say that it's not, but like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's other ways to deal with those concerns. It sets a precedence for me. So when you look at it that way, then when do we say for like another family or another family or another family, like where do you draw that? So.
That would be a legislative thing. I don't think anybody here knows that more than me.
No, I mean, if people want to vote on it, we can vote on it.
We can vote later. We can ask if they want to stay for closed, but if we're asking if they want to stay for closed, we need to have questions that you're going to need to know that you want to discuss something. Okay. Questions? Yeah. No questions?
Chelsea, did you have some questions you want to ask? Do we want to vote, or do we want to think on it, or I'm good with whatever? Derek? Okay.
Vote.
Okay. Okay.
Did you have any questions that you would want to ask in a closed session?
Okay. Well, then I need a motion and a second to approve the annexation for the Dean family property, which is approximately 4.5 acres of land, includes part of the southwest 1/4 of Section 17 and part of the southeast 1/4 of Section 18, all in Township 21 North, Range 4 east of the 3rd Principal Meridian, DeWitt County, Illinois, as presented. That's Jonathan and Chelsea.
Do you understand what you just read? What you read was an approval.
Mhm. Okay.
So if you vote yes, you're approving to annex it.
Right.
No. Okay, up next is discuss for approval of tentative tax levy and set date of December 18th, 2024 for the truth in taxation hearing and approval of tax levy.
Douglas, are you back there? Am I going to be able, is the live stream going to be able to see anything that I'm doing? Yes? Okay. Can somebody bring me the clicker? Thank you. I don't mean to be so helpless. Okay, so we're going to go through our presentation tonight. This is our tentative tax levy presentation. How do I wake it up? Say please.
I saw it go over there.
Okay, I'll just click the other way. Okay. School funding components. So school funding is comprised of federal, state, and local dollars. Federal money is received through grants. You hear Paige talk about Title I, II, and IV. Title I school improvement funding that we had received for a bit of time when we had targeted schools. IDEA is our special education funding. Our ESSER grants, which are, what page? Are they done now? Yeah, she's happy. Federal funds also include reimbursement that we get for national breakfast and lunch programs and summer food service. State money comes through what we call EBF, or evidence-based funding, and also reimbursement for transportation costs, special education, driver's ed, free lunch and breakfast, grants for early childhood and ag education. Blue Ridge anticipates that our EBF dollars for this year will be $889,073. We are, I believe, we're at the top tier. I believe that's tier number 4, not tier number 1, saying that we are adequately funded by our local tax dollars, so we don't get nearly what other school districts do in EBF dollars because they say that we have our own resources here. So take that as good or bad, whatever you might say. Local funding comes from tax dollars requested through the annual tax levy. And we do rely most heavily on our local funds, as you can see in the dark blue there, 85%. Federal is 6%, state is 9%. So the tax levy is based on the EAV, or Equalized Assessed Valuation, of all the properties within the boundaries of our district. So we have 212 square miles of rich farmland, so we have a very strong EAV and have for a number of years, providing a lot of financial stability for the district, thankfully. We have one wind farm, that's our McLean County wind farm, Sapphire Sky. That's already operational. And so last year, the levy year 2023, was when we saw a great increase in the EAV from McLean County. And we are currently in the first budget that has that fund amount coming in. That will be there, will be a little bit of a fluctuation, but that will be present for the next 30 years. We have another wind farm coming in, as I know when I leave my house every morning and return home. That one's in Piatt County. It's Prosperity Wind Farm. It's currently under construction. You'll see that many of those turbines are already up. They are not operational yet. I do believe that if they start turning in January of 25, then they will be there will be a very heavy increase again in EAV that Mr. Payton will write for levy year 2025, about a year from now. And that will start coming in July of 26, which is actually called the FY27 budget. Probably not all of it will be turning by January, so there will still be another increase in levy year 26, which is the FY28 budget. So just like we had our first big increase in last year's levy, this year's levy had a slight increase as well. So our 10-year EAV data, you can see right there, the 23 and 24 levy, noticeable jumps. That was from that first wind farm. If you see down at the bottom, the increase from last year in our EAV, and these are just estimates right now. They're not real numbers. They're just the best they can give us in each county. Our increase we anticipate is just over 8% in our EAV. Our 5-year average is 8.78, and our 10-year average is a little bit lower because that was before the wind farm, so that was 5.89. Tax levy proceeds, what happens with them? That's money that comes in, and that's our revenue sources that you see on the budget for the Ed Fund, the O&M Fund, the bond and interest, transportation, Social Security and IMRF, our working cash fund, our tort fund, and health, life, safety. We also have part of our levy is for special education and for leasing. Those funds actually go into the education fund, so they don't have their own special bucket that they go into. The bond and interest portion of the tax levy is actually done by the county clerk in each of our three counties. It's kind of like a trust thing. I guess they don't necessarily trust that we're going to levy enough for to be able to pay our debt off, so they want to do that themselves. So that's just how it works. But we use it in our calculations. We know what we have to pay off our debt, and so that's part of what we calculate so we can control the overall tax rate by making sure that we're considering that bond and interest tax rate. Due to significant EAV increases in our last year, Blue Ridge was able to bond for $6.2 million for HLS projects and the track field and Memorial Plaza project while keeping the overall tax rate nearly the same as what it was the previous year. That's done through lowering the operating tax rate and raising the bond and interest tax rate, so we're paying more in one area than we were in another area, but overall we're still looking at a very good, steady overall tax rate. 10-year bond and interest tax rate trends. So you can see sometimes we have a little bit more debt, sometimes we start to pay that down, and then we issue more, and we kind of ride that roller coaster. But that is what we worked on with PMA advisor Steve Adams. He came and they basically time out the repayment schedule for the bond. So when you're about ready to pay off one bond, that's when you start paying more heavily on another bond. So they can average those out a little bit better to keep the cost pretty much the same. This is a nice graph that I like to show, kind of like a double bar graph here, where you can see the operating and bond and interest rates together. So the dark blue is what we call the operating rate, and the light blue is what the county actually levies for the bond and interest. And then if you put those numbers together, which you can see up on the top, that's what we're projecting would be our tax rate. So you can see we've gone from, on the left top, the 5.43, 5.40, 5.31, 5.29. You can see we were going down. We went really low when we hit that 5.19, and we're staying pretty close to that. I do want to mention that our goal last year, we thought in the fall that we were going to be on the 23 bar that you have right there. We expected that was going to be right the same as the year before, the 519.8, or just a little bit under. Sometimes we have, what do you call it, when somebody goes to try to dispute their property tax bill? Sometimes the EAV takes a drop when residents have gone in to have that conversation. I don't know if that would be at the county clerk's office, but if that drops the EAV, if they win that discussion, then the EAV factor goes down, so your tax rate goes up a little bit. Those are things that we're not in control of the final numbers. We just control the dollar amount that we ask for. So we were pretty close last year. We intend to be pretty close again this year in our ask. So the tentative levy, this is just a different way to show you what we just did. On the top, you can see operating, and then bond and interest, and the overall tax rate. So you can see over the last couple of years, we are definitely lower than what we were in 21, which is nice. And we're just a little bit higher than what we have been in 22 and 23 for the estimated overall tax rate for this year. Part of my presentation, and it also has to be noted in the minutes, is that we show you what our unaudited fund, I'd like to say they were audited fund balances right now as of 6/30/24, but auditor has not been on site yet. We're hoping that's going to happen fairly soon. But those are the unaudited fund balances that we're looking at so far. That is a required part that I tell you about when we talk about the levy. And we also have to do one more thing, a fund balance reduction plan check. So I have to look at the average expenditures in funds 10, 20, and 40 over the last 3 years. So I add up the total for the last 3 years, divide it out, and I see what that number is. And I have to see if that is more than 2.5 times, let's see if the respective fund balance sum is more than 2.5 times the average expenditures. So when we looked at it, the average expenditures in those funds for FY22, 3, and 4 was $10.2 million, and the current respective unaudited fund balance sum is 9.7. So no reduction plan is needed at this time. This is just the tentative levy that we bring to you, and I will say that Mr. Payton was able to take part in the levy process. We met with our coach, Randy Merker, who's also going to be working still for the ROE next year. We were both very happy to hear about that. Next year's levy will be pleasantly tricky with the new wind farm coming in. So Randy is ready to work side by side with Ryan, so I think that's a good place to be. We could potentially make changes before we bring it back to you in December. What we do right now is, because our dollar amount that we're asking for is more than a 5% increase from last year, and that's due to our leftover jump from the first wind farm. Because that's over a 5% increase, we have to publish in the paper what's called a black box. It's just a big, heavy black bordered box that talks about the numbers that I just presented, and that has to go in the newspaper 7 to 14 days before the next board meeting to tell them that we will have a hearing. And so we would like to, part of your approval tonight will be setting that hearing date and time for the next board meeting at 6:50. And part of the strategic plan, as I was looking at it again today, was for the superintendent to be explaining the tax levy in a manner in which it can be understood. So you can give me a thumbs up, a thumbs sideways, or a thumbs down. We're doing, yay!
Can we make sure that it's in the newspaper 14 days, whatever the longest time period it has to be?
We can try. It depends on when they will put it in, but we'll send it in tomorrow. Yeah. It has to be between that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I need a motion, we need to approve this, right?
Yep.
A motion and a second to approve the tentative tax levy and set the date of December 18th for approval of the tax levy for Blue Ridge Community Unit School District number 18 as presented. Derek. Jonathan. Yes. Next is the approval of application for the FY25 school maintenance grant.
Okay. We have to bring this to the board before we start this process because we have to have a couple signatures and dates at which we did get those signatures to be able to apply for this grant. It's a matching grant. The state will match up to $50,000. They actually, once they approve the application, they send you the $50,000. It sits in our account, and then we have a certain period of time in which to spend it on that project. If we don't, then they will come back and say, give me our portion back. And that has happened to us before because we didn't have a project that was large enough. This time, Rusty has identified working with the ceiling tiles and the ceiling grid on the second story of this building. We have some dripping situations going on when we are sending the cold water through the pipes. And so if we can do proper insulation up there, we won't have dripping onto the ceiling tiles causing staining and a potential mold issue. So we have not been as lucky getting the two different companies that we already do business with would be the types of companies that would come in and do that project. And we've asked for some estimates. We're hoping we hear at least $125,000. Because then we're guaranteed to use all $50,000 from the state. If it comes in crazy high, then we'll cut the project in half if we need to, and do half with this school maintenance grant and do half with another school maintenance grant. You did that already with the VAV boxes between Susan and myself. So your approval will allow Francie to sign the documents tonight and for me to file everything tomorrow by the December deadline.
I realized that earlier. I was like, oh, okay. So I need a motion and a second from Jonathan and Chelsea to approve the superintendent to apply for the school maintenance grant for Blue Ridge CUSD number 18 as presented.
Second. Don't you take my second.
Jonathan and Chelsea.
Yes.
I was like, please approve it. I think I already signed it.
Do you remember if you signed the BACC thing? I did. Okay, good.
Yes. Okay, up next is special classroom research update.
All righty, and I've asked Mr. Payne to take this one, so come on up, take it away.
We have not hit his 8 o'clock request to be done. Ryan, Ellen Levine.
I blame you guys for that.
Not being done by 8.
Yeah, we're not going to make it.
Yeah, probably not.
All right, so I'll try to make it quick though. So we've been exploring, looking at adding a specialized classroom or program really to support students that have some more social emotional needs that are pretty complex. So Blair Green and I, our special ed administrator, she's really coordinated several visits with some area districts looking at districts that have programs similar to this already that are out there and existing. So one thing that I've realized through the beginning of this process is these programs vary immensely in the services, level support, philosophy behind how they operate. We've done one visit so far. I know we have another one set up next week. We have a virtual meeting with another program sometime in December or January, so it's taking a little bit of time to able to get into the programs. But the first visit was pretty successful overall. There was quite a few takeaways. And that's really what this process is, being able to go and visit or have conversations with these programs that are existing to kind of see if we want to, how do we develop and takeaways of how we can implement something that's going to work for us. The program that we visited most recently was in the Bloomington Normal area. I would tell you just from a facilities standpoint, it looks extremely different than anything that we would be able to provide. So this was a program that was an existing, it's a current elementary school. Their district had put in quite a bit of money to basically add on a facility connected to the main school. Had kind of a main school setting, an entryway. Everything from that point on was key in and key out, kind of come through the electronic process. Multiple timeout rooms, 4 classrooms specifically. It just looked like something that we just don't have anything near that type of facility to operate. But there was a lot of takeaways from just the programming itself that were there. Some of the key things that we really got from it were it's a really focus on Maslow before Bloom's, really looking at meeting students' needs first, academics really as a secondary or tertiary thing. I mean, they're really focusing on how do we help students through an SEL mindset, how do we develop self-regulation, helping them understand the brain, helping them understand, just different aspects of more of that side. So I would say probably 85% of the day really was that SEL focus, mindfulness, teaching about video modeling, teaching about SEL kind of just philosophy, I guess I would call it, and then practical ways that we implement those things as students. Some of the things that they had there, they had about 5 to 10 students in each room. They were broken down by 2 grade levels, like a K1, a 2, 3, K1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the way that they were kind of operating and set up. They had 1 teacher and 3 paras in every classroom, and there was about 5 to 6 kids in every classroom. And so that was kind of the setup that was there. I think one of the other big takeaways is the importance of staff in that process. I mean, you know, you have to have an individual that has a philosophy very similar with whatever program that you're trying to create. And so that was something that I had a conversation with the director of, and I even asked her, you know, from a standpoint of, you know, do you have interview questions? Do you have things that you utilize specifically to kind of figure out that you're going to have the right person that's going to create this program and help sustain it and maintain it. So she said she would share all of that information with me. They do have entrance and exit criteria. That is something that their program does have. She's going to share it with us, has not yet. So that is something that I'll be able to share with at some point. They also offer like a 45-day, it's kind of like a 45-day review. They look at data, and then they basically make determinations upon placement. So within that setting that we were in, there were students that were full day in that program and never left that building, ate lunch, specials, everything was in that space. They actually even had their own playground. Own playground that was fenced in and was just for students that were in the program. But that varied a little bit as far as what the programming looked like. There were students that had specials outside of the program. There were some that had specials and one or two academic courses. So it really just depended on every so often, you know, reviewing, seeing where students are at, and then once again kind of meeting and adjusting the program to how that student would be most successful. But that is kind of the main process that we have there. Like I said, there's going to be a lot, an abundance of timing, planning, resources that is going to go into, you know, making a determination of whether or not this will be possible. We still have to visit at least 2 to 3 more programs out there. You know, I would really like the board to think about continuing with Mrs. Diener for next year. Because whether or not we have the program in place, if we do have a program like this in place, in addition to having a first-year principal, we're going to need somebody that can help and support a program like this get up and running and to fine-tune it. She has that experience from Clinton. She had a very similar experience through her elementary principalship. And even if we don't have the program up and running, she would be there just to support day in and day out behavior and things that do occur throughout. So either way, I would like to ask, you know, for that moving forward, or just to think about that as we kind of go into next school year. That is kind of my update at this point. Like I said, we have another visit next month, so I can share more about that and kind of give you an update. I know that we'll also be meeting with the program. It's called the PASS program. And that'll be a process where it's more really geared toward in-house and developing students in like a space inside of your building, but kind of like I talked about, you know, reviewing and getting kids out into the general ed classroom based upon their growth and data review. So there's several different philosophies, and we're just trying to find out how feasible they are. One of our biggest issues, though, going back to my initial and very first thought, was the facility side of things. We don't have a big space anywhere. You know, we really don't have classrooms open in our building. We have a couple of classrooms that are available that are more like mini classrooms. You know, they are not very big. So that is going to be an obstacle that we will have that we'll really have to kind of brainstorm through. Any questions? Any specific questions you have that maybe I can think about as I interview some of these programs?
I think about creating flexible spaces, not just for today's needs, future needs. So
Right.
even things that we think we may not have special need for, like sometimes as simple as like how high are your counters and things like that. Like how did you design these spaces for these people? Are we getting that sort of like physical data too?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. And yes, so this program that we went to, they had specific kind of like roller lockers, which were pretty interesting, where they had all their stuff in this space and it was really in their area. Yeah, so those are all good questions. You know, even when you talk about support from like OT, occupational therapy, and PT, a lot of these individuals were in the same space or providing services in that space. And so that's just that's something that's going to be an obstacle potentially. It just depends. You know, we'll just have to kind of see and gather more information. But yeah, great question. Those accessibility features are really important when we talk about organizing the physical space. Yeah, so that'll definitely be something that we think about. Good question.
Have you seen any examples where they brought in not mobile but temporary classrooms and relocated some of the primary classrooms to those temporary ones and used that other space to create this main classroom?
I have not personally seen that, no. I'm not aware of any around here particularly. I know Mahomet has like temporary classrooms, but I don't know how they reorganized and did things.
My only thought with that is it might be easier to use the space that we already have at Schneider and relocate a regular classroom to that temporary classroom.
That's a good question. That's a good thought.
It's at least an option.
Yeah. I've never worked in the temporary classroom field. I don't know what that's like. I've never brought in trailers and things like that to create, different spaces. So that would be, I know it's not very fond of typically I've heard that sometimes your community members don't care for that very much, but I don't know. That'll be a question and a conversation if it gets to that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did 4th grade. Yeah, I thought it was fun too.
Yeah. I guess you find ways to make it,
Yeah.
a
I know
positive.
Champaign Schools did it before their remodeling, because when I was a mentor at Southside, their specials were out there. So like I would go with her to music, and we would go outside to the portables, not the trailer, that just doesn't sound right. I know, but it's just, yeah. Okay. Okay. Now I need a motion and a second to move from open session to closed session for discussion of appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district at 8:46. Derek and Sig. Yes.